Good morning here anyway. It's my honor to stand before you this morning, even as I sit, with the title, Conducting Basic Market Research for Customer-Focused Products and Services. I come before you as a marketing person. My first degree was in marketing and politics. I started working at Ray Nevio, which I imagine is a customer-focused product manufacturer. I next worked for Beecham Products in the Caribbean and in the USA. That's sort of things like Aquafresh toothpaste and Secret sore throat lozenges. Next thing I worked for was Grace Kennedy, which is a food distributor and a distributor of virtually anything else you can think of. So again, products. My next job was working in an advertising agency where I still am at Dunlop Corbin. And there we think of ourselves as being services. And we think we're customer focused. We hope we are. Now, marketing people like to use lots of military terms. You hear us talking about target audiences as if we're going to shoot people. And we talk about campaigns as if, you know, we're Rommel. And other times we're talking about various tactics that we're going to use, and we talk about flights of media. So, you know, we're very, very military. And I think a wonderful point of departure for any discussion of market research is a fellow called Machiavelli, which brings my politics together, because Mr. Machiavelli is looked at as being the beginning of modern political thought. And page 1 of the Prince is going to urge you to walk the battlefield. And he had a very, very clear goal in that. It was the idea that if you walk the battlefield, you might see a trench that the enemy could fall down into, at which point it would be very weak and you could pounce on them. Or you might find yourself in a place that you are upon a hill and the guy with a bow and arrow could hit you. And so you'd have to be very careful. And you needed, if you didn't walk the battlefield, then you were taking a much greater risk with your people. And what's very interesting is Machiavelli felt that it was the prince himself who had to walk the battlefield. He didn't send a minion out. It was the prince, which is the title of the book. So it's not surprising. It's very basic, but it's an important lesson that you need to know the very basics of things. Start your campaign before you launch your product. The other thing I think that is very valuable about Machiavelli's advice is how clear he was about his reason for conducting his research. He wanted to take advantage of some weakness somebody else might have, and he wanted to be careful that his own weaknesses weren't exposed. So I think as you guys are doing market research, I think you need to be focused on the goals and objectives of your research. Having said all of that, there are very many forms of market research, all ways of walking this proverbial battlefield, all ways of learning more. First of all, the things are very fact-based ones. You can do desk research where you're pulling down existing statistics. Some of it might be in your national domain. Jamaica has its various population data coming out of censuses, and there's a great deal of stuff having to do with published with economic and social surveys, etc., etc. And you can be reviewing the literature. There's an awful lot written about an awful lot of things. And that is research. One of the interesting things in my little career was I was selling Secret sore throat lozenges. And my predecessors in the job had discovered an outrageously strong correlation between flu and influenza deaths and the sale of sore throat lozenges. And it was quite macabre, but we subscribed to the Center for Disease Control, which published this data. And it was really useful. We could go in there and we would know before we got our Nielsen data that we were going to have a really good quarter. So that's an example of easy desk research. The other rather simple form of research is simply visiting the trade, store visits. It is absolutely amazing how much you can learn by simply walking into a supermarket and looking at it. If you are selling something that's going to sell in a supermarket, it's hard to beat walking into 20 of them. Be careful you're not walking into 20 of the same ones. You want to vary it. But if you're going in there and you're looking at it systematically, you're going to learn a lot. I guarantee you the guy with the most share of facings is very likely the guy who is the leading person in that field. If you're doing this in the United States, you're going to find more Crest than Colgate. If you're doing it in Jamaica, you're going to find more Colgate than Crest. I guarantee you, because the way retailers are set up is that they're going to make more money if they're paying attention to market share. So that's a really easy way to find things. And the more discipline that you take to that, the better you will be. If you're just going in and saying, oh, it looks like more of this and more of that, you'll learn something. If you're going in and counting the number of facings, you're probably going to learn even more. All right. And similarly, the other thing that's out there that is really a matter of just observing is an area called media monitoring. You can look at things. You can read the newspapers quite easily. If you're in small Caribbean islands, it's relatively easy to go through and read a great deal of newspapers and see who is advertising in the newspaper. Similarly, in most of our territories, one or two TV stations and radio stations have the bulk of the audience. Look and see who is advertising on them. And that'll give you a good sense of whether you're entering a field that has a lot of advertising or little or none. It's nice to know, because if it has lots of advertising, it means you have to have money to spend if you're going to use that as a way of reaching out. Then again, if it doesn't have any, maybe you have an opportunity that you will have a very high share of voice. Okay. The second broad class of research is another form of walking the battlefield. It is asking the people you know and the ones you trust, who know more than you. Ask them what they know about what is of interest to you. Very many years ago, I had the privilege to attend what we in Jamaica call the University of Harbour Street. And at that time, the dean was the Honorable Carlton Alexander. And his approach, and I wouldn't say a secret because it was no secret, he encouraged us all to do the same. And that was, get out there and ask questions. And he encouraged us all to do the same. And we liked the job, so we did what we were asked to do. And what it ended up with was a stream of people coming in and reporting amongst ourselves as to what was being said. And it was a very rich environment with an awful lot of information floating about. And it gave a very accurate insight into what was happening in our trade. And it would be difficult to replicate that as an individual company, because I may have had 15 or 16 people feeding into me in any one meeting. But still, trust me, one person asking the right person is very important. And it's key to know who the right person is. It's not necessarily the person with the most knowledge, because you have to have somebody who is open to talk to you. Then again, you don't want people who are open talking to you, giving you wrong information. So you have to pay attention to what you're getting and filter it and decide what is really important. And you know, this is something you get if any of your pharmaceutical representatives are trained as they're in with the doctors, they're asking them what what's happening now. Again, they're picking up, if there's a flu epidemic, if there is ZIKV going around, trust me, they're asking. And it's a really good way of getting answers. Provided, of course, that you listen to the answers. And then there's a question of surveys, which is what most of us think of when we talk of market research, is we think, oh, we'll do a survey and we'll find out what is really going on. The theory of surveys is very, very simple. We're going to select a small sample. We're going to make sure that sample is representative of the whole. We're going to study that sample very closely, and we're just going to multiply it out, and we're going to know everything. The potential payoff of that is enormous in so many ways. It's so much cheaper than to learn about the whole country. It allows us to conduct experiments. You'll be absolutely fascinated by the experiments that you see out there. A career I once paid $300,000 American to Nielsen because they were going to run a thing where they showed my ad to a group of people and then let them into a simulated supermarket and see whether or not they bought advertised. And they do the same thing with another panel that didn't see the ad. And from this, they would give me a national projection of how well my new product would do. And we paid $300,000 for it. And it worked. They told us not to do the project we had in mind. I think with benefit of hindsight, quite wisely. With the survey tool, I think one has to be very, very realistic and to realize that you're not the master of the universe, that you're going to have to pay very, very close attention to what you're doing, because it's very easy for you to get very wrong information. And there are very many professional market research firms who are publishing, you can list the names. There'll be a long list of people who have called the wrong election, call elections wrong, I should say. But that doesn't invalidate market research. What it does is it invalidates the guy who did it wrong. So my big thing is maintain some skepticism and test all your assumptions. All right. Just to try and give some perspective on the cost of research. What's happening? I can't just keep talking. Okay. Give some perspective of research morning with. Just try and give some perspective on the cost of. Can I get back to that question of Facebook as a survey tool? And just finish this thought and I'll come back to it. I checked with Market Research Services and they quoted me for a simple 200-person mall intercept sample with reporting a cost of $500,000 Jamaican dollars. It's not cheap, and it's especially not cheap. But in the value of getting that information from them was the point that the person made, which was, if you're not going to spend the money, you need to be spending the time. You need to do it properly, otherwise you're wasting your time. There's a question coming in asking me, what do I think of Facebook as a survey tool? I think it's wonderful. I think you have to be really, really conscious of the limitation it has, which is how representative is the group that you're talking to of the people that you do want to talk to. If you're in the United States and the entire country is on Facebook, that's probably less of a problem than it will be in Jamaica. Having said that, you test your way in, but do not start out assuming it's going to be representative, because it is a select group of people, and it's selected by interest as much as by socioeconomic factors. like for instance, I might be very, very high relative to the rest of the population on income or education, but I'm very, very, very low as a Facebook user. I'm nervous about personal information from back in the day. Never mind. But yeah, it's a tool. There's lots of other stuff out there on the web. Your Survey Monkey is a great tool. I don't know much there. That much I know. I know it's good. I know that it has. Again, it's a matter of you needing to apply the discipline of the field. Make sure your sample represents the whole. And the moment you're into the internet, you have self-selected yourself into a group that is not representative of Caribbean, I think. But it may be totally representative of what you're doing is selling computers, and then everybody's going to be on the internet who is interested. I hope that's tried to answer that question. Oh, the other thing I want to say with having given you that quotation from our friends at Market Research Services is to say that they as a company and many other research companies in Jamaica are happy to work with SMEs, small and medium enterprises, I think, in recognizing that not everybody has $500,000. They may be able to give you very valuable advice for $50,000. So it's a matter of approaching people and working with them. But one way or another, I say, whatever you do it properly. Okay, and here I'm going to say, if you're going to do the, and I'm repeating myself, if you're going to do the research, please be real. You have to know the math. And if you're like me and don't know the math, you can work with people that might be at the university. They might be your friend that was a genius. But you need the math. And there's no way around that. You've got to, you have to, your questionnaire has to be neutral. And doing it, showing it to people, and being sure it's neutral. You cannot ask questions of how are you still beating your wife. You need to be neutral. And the temptation is always to write that's for yourself, because that's how you're thinking. But you can't do that because you want neutral information coming back to you. Set your questionnaire up so that it allows analysis. And what I mean by that is make sure you're asking some basic demographic information so you can go back and sort it by whether it's a man or a woman, whether it's somebody who is in a particular age group. Income is always difficult, so you can find your other ways of using markers for income. I don't know. Education is sometimes a good marker. If you're doing it as a personal interview, you can look at the person's demeanor and their dress and form opinions. Question?
You said income is difficult. What about it actually is difficult? Acquiring the information about a person's income.
Yeah, if you ask me how much I owe, it's a question that people are very likely to give you wrong information on. It's not even that they won't answer you, it's that they'll tell you nonsense. So I would not be inclined to ask somebody straight up how much do you earn. But that's me. The other thing is keep comparing the sample to the whole population. And my friend at the market research company said, focus on the key informant. The key informant being, who is it you really need answering this question? Asking me about dresses is probably not a bright idea. Finally, I think it's important you spend time analyzing the data. And in doing that, techniques, I worked for a company where I was not allowed to comment on anything that didn't have a statistical significance at the 95% confidence level. But I would go around and tell them there are 7 indicators here, all directionally positive. And they wouldn't allow me to write that into any of the company's records. And it's a good decision. The guys that had learned it at Procter. Okay. The other thing I was going to tell you is that, again, it's on the question of analyzing data. And I give you the example. My company, we buy survey data that's coming from a public company, say Market Research Services. They do, yeah, someone is saying I should ask them to state a range rather than asking for a flat amount. Yes, that's one way. That's one good way of doing it. No problem. I'm back on the importance of analyzing data. Our company, for instance, is going to go out and spend a good deal of money buying survey data on radio and television listenership in Jamaica. Everybody else, many of the people we compete with, have bought that same data. And any advantage that my company is going to have is a function of how at working with it. It helps that a colleague has put it all into Excel, and so we're able to whip it out and give you fairly quick readings of whichever group your target is. It's also useful that buying the same sort of data for the last 20 or 30 years. So we have a good deal of trend information, which can be useful when you're working with surveys that are typically done over a 2 or 3 week period. And you're going to be applying it for a year. You get 1 year that goes crazy for one radio station. You might want to be cautious in going and putting all your money there. And one of the big things about spending time analyzing the data is paying attention always to its limitations. You bought a survey in this case that's plus or minus 2% at a 95% confidence level, but that's for the overall findings. It's not for when you're going in and you're looking at who in Santa Cruz is listening to KLAS. Trust me, it's not. KLAS may have a 2% market share, and Santa Cruz is a really small part of the whole nation. So don't think that your finding in there is going to be accurate, even if you're Mutty Perkins, who once challenged Mr. Anderson's. Anyway, enough of that. Now, this sort of omnibus data can be very valuable to smaller companies. For perspective, this morning I had an email come into my office from Marketing Strategy, which is another Jamaican marketing company, and they run an 800 sample that you can go in and ask one question for 30,000 J. Now, cautious again. Made very stupid mistakes with that sort of survey data. I once went in and bought 10 questions, all asking for household incidents of basic household products like dishwashing liquid and detergent. And I thought I was a genius on that. And it was just too many questions. We were asking the same respondent, and we got nonsense. So use it with. Okay, a related approach to Mr. Alexander's question of going out and asking questions. and sampling is the notion of focus groups. And focus groups are a wonderful thing. You pay a market research. I had a quote this morning of, I think, $85,000 to $125,000, Jay, for a focus group of 8 people. And you're going to go in there and you're going to probe and listen to them, and you're going to be very neutral. And this is very, very difficult. But you're very neutral, you're pulling out from them information and hoping it's going to be useful. And it can be very, very useful. It is a refreshing, people are quite open, they're happy to talk to you. And they're going to share their opinions. And it is interesting how much you can learn. In my experience, I worked for a company where we thought very much, and we was in deodorants for many years after, and we relied on focus groups, and we typically do 4 in Kingston, 4 in Bridgetown, Barbados, and 4 in Trinidad. And it was with an English researcher who was traveling the thing, and she had properly chosen samples, and she was highly skilled. And we got back what we thought was very valuable information. And we were careful with the information. We thought it was very useful to us. And yet, when you sit back and I look back at it 20, 30 years later, the company went to that research with lots of advantages. We were the #1 deodorant company in the United Kingdom. We were working with the leading distributors in each of those countries. Our advertising agency was itself very proven. And we had a lot of money throwing at that category. So the research might have been an important tool, but there were lots of other factors. The qualitative research like that needs a reiteration of the same caution that we have on all other research, which is if you don't do it, mislead yourselves and get yourself into serious trouble. And it's particularly difficult if you yourself are trying to do it. What I would say to you is don't do it yourself. If you need to do it yourself, get a friend to do it for you. Just get yourself at least one space removed. What's that? All right, then. Are there any more questions? Not yet. We're going to do a survey, and there are many ways to do it. We can do random personal. This is what the professionals will strive for. They will pre-select communities to match to the national, to the regional, and to the local. They will take what they call random walk. In other words, they might say, okay, I'll stop at every 3rd door. And then they have a formula who they want to talk to in that house. They may decide they want to talk to the man. They may decide they want to talk to what they call the head of the household. But they have themselves a very rigorous thing of what they're going to do. Similarly, you've got random telephone message through. And that's, again, professionals developing databases matched to the national, regional, and local. And they train the researchers, and they're calling through. They're able to do it and get good things. It'll work. One of the very key things with it is making sure that you're getting a representational sample. If you go back 30 years in Jamaica, there was no such thing as a representative phone usage because 12% of the people had phones. Fast forward to now, and everybody has 2 phones. So it should be a lot more possible to do it today than it was then, provided you're using cell phones. And you get to the same question with random internet. difficult for you to think that you can get a representational sample on the internet in the Caribbean, but that'll improve over time. Question?
Maybe another question I have before about systematic ways of determining whether or not your data pool is represented. You're mentioning it's not, but is there a direction specific points?
Yeah, I think it goes to what they're talking about, the informant you're looking for. You need to figure out who it is you really need to hear from, and then test to see if you're representational. If you're selling shampoo or a mass market product, then you want to know that it's representation of the total. If you're selling $10 million cars, you really are interested in people who can afford that. And you need to figure out how you can test the thing. Typically, what is trying to match it to publicly available data. So you'll be able to go in and know what percentage of Jamaicans are earning the sort of money that will allow you to buy a $10 million car. And then you make sure your sample matches that. When you're even more, you're going to get yourself to a point sometimes you want interviewing, and you really don't want it to be representation. Useful.
I just know if there's, I just want like a detailed methodology of determining whether or not. I mean, I can make an assumption, I can make an hypothesis that if I have this amount, like I said, 1% of the total market pool, then I could debate that because of the way I phrase the questions, that it could possibly be representative of the 100% market pool, but not necessarily the case.
No, you want to, whatever your target group is, you want your sample to match that. If it's mass market products, yes, it's going to be the whole population. But you've narrowed yourself down, and very quickly you do. Somebody's talking about householders. Well, that gets you down to a relatively small percentage of people. If you're doing ownership, you just want to make sure your math is what I think the key is. Focus personal, telephone, internet. Such questionnaires can be very valuable, especially when looking for expert opinion. But again, be careful not to be thinking that you're looking at something representative. Where do you go for secondary data? PIOJ? Yeah, I guess PIOJ has them. Yeah, PIOJ has a library that sells stuff. There's a guy called Google that has a good deal of information in a lot of areas where you're doing any sort of. The statin is your other for information like that. You find as well as you Google things, there'll be all sorts of specialized university studies that will pop up in that can be very useful to you depending on the category you're working in. Sorry, as I'm answering that, I'm realizing I was asked to make sure that I gave some examples of how important it is in our Caribbean environment to make sure that you have sensible research. Again, this morning, speaking with a research company, they brought up Taco Bell. Apparently, someone launched Taco Bell in Jamaica thinking that there was going to be a taco culture. That firm apparently had a lot of data telling them that it wasn't going to, and they went ahead anyway because they like taco. It wasn't very successful. Just so you don't think I'm being nasty to other people, the greatest debacle I've ever been involved in was trying to launch a shampoo called Bristol Shampoo and Conditioner in One. And 5 years later, I came back to Jamaica. The people were trying to sell the empty bottles that we had bought for the first 3 months of sale. It was a total disaster. And the simple fact of the matter is our company didn't pay attention to the research that we had conducted. We had done a good deal of focus group work, and that focus group work was disastrous. The habits, this is in 1974, the habits that the Jamaicans had for hair care were not conducive to selling a shampoo and conditioner in one. These were women that never washed their own hair. In very large measure, they went with such a frequency. And it was a very, we came to learn the hard way. So, again, pay attention to your research. Now, I've been told that our goal here is to have us strategize on market segmentation, product differentiation, and catering to consumer needs. In short, we need to think that the consumer is key. Well, market research is a very way to read in the use of specialist firms. And I'm, of course, a little under prejudice since I work for a specialist advertising agency. But the fact of the matter is that the key to good research is going to be not money, not who is doing it, but rather a very careful attention to the basics. Determine what question you want to answer. Determine who can answer that question. Go there. Make sure you're neutral. Make sure you're listening. And make sure you're analyzing what you get back. Try and use the same tools that the professionals are going to be listening. That's my presentation. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
Right, so before I mentioned obtaining the census data, where do we typically go? You said PIOJ, that was for the
Statin. Statin is going to, but there's an awful lot of it at Google.
Right. For Jamaica?
For anywhere in the world.
Okay.
This is a company with a goal that says we're going to put all the world's information before you.
Right. And let's say we have a variable competitor, right? We want to look at how, or someone that has attempted something similar elsewhere in a different market share and want to obtain a measure of their level of sales or their general success in that market.
Okay.
Where can we begin to get that feedback? Is there like an online board or service?
It's very. I think it's going to be very dependent on the product category you're in. What it is, if it's shampoo, yeah, there's a lot of information on shampoo, how do you get it, and you need to pay it. If you want to know shampoo, and you're serious about shampoo, you're going to have some relationship with the trade, and they'll tell you, they know. They may not know to the decimal point, but they very well can give you a ranking. And I happen not to know that category anymore. As I told you, I lost my shirt in it.
Right. So it's really just to know to ask them. It's not really, there's not really a general service or that type of thing for businesses, like information.
It's gonna vary from market to market.
Right, so what we're doing is a type of smart plug.
A smart plug.
Yeah, and then maybe if there's one in Europe that is very similar to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out the feedback that they're getting in their sales. And the most that I've been able to acquire is basically internet reviews. And I have an app on Play Store. I can look on the comments and get feedback that I don't necessarily be that representative of everybody that actually buys it. I want to know exactly what, if they're actually making a profit. If it's a case where this product, I mean, that would be a magic.
It might be, sorry, it might be a measure of penetration levels. What percentage of consumers are using this product in that market? That might well be available. What you get to is things like that, where you're using available information as a proxy for what you really want to know. Because what you want to know, if you had somebody in that market that you trusted, that you could get to say, okay, right, walk into, forgive me, I don't know who the Comp USA of England is, but walk into that company and talk to them. You'll get a lot of information. It's difficult for you to sit here in Jamaica and do that, but the chances are that you can network to the point that you can get somebody to do that. And that, I think, will give you good qualitative information. Again, if you can't get exactly what you want, go for something close that works as a proxy for it, is what I think. Anybody else? Well, she's giving me another. Or online. I have somebody else telling me I can use Google keywords. I agree with them.
Google keywords?
In other words, the idea that you can Google it, you can try and find a good deal of information online. There's a lot more out there than we all realize. It's not likely to be in exactly the way we want it. It's very much exploring around it and seeing how you can ask about it.
The methods used by professionals, in the sense that the methodology that they use, they really want to base our research on our expertise in that nature. I mean, we know that to a certain degree. But we just need to know what methods it is. Like, could you just tell me a few statistical methods that.
Who, me? I don't know, man. Sorry.
Where do we go to obtain knowledge of how to learn these systematic methodologies?
Well, these guys have business schools all the way around here. Every one of them has a pile of people in there that are being taught how to use it. And the fact of the matter is that what you need is not necessarily be able to do the math as much as to have respect for it, to know that the thing needs to be statistically reliable. Get somebody else to run the data for you. But approach it that you need to know that what you're working with is real data. And that you're designing the stuff sensibly. And you also, any of your research companies are working with one. But if you're not, I would say that you're going to be able to find it in math departments across the math and business schools. I mean, it really isn't terribly difficult stuff. It's just that I got B's. And I go and ask other people.
Yeah.
But I know I need to do it. I put everybody abroad to sleep.
Concerns we're having about the survey tool is that we were concerned about the level of feedback that we might get, like you mentioned, about questions that pertain to income, as well as sometimes questions we might want or the data we might want can be a bit overwhelming for somebody to want to answer. If we want to survey a large amount of people, and we approach somebody randomly for them to go through a long sheet of paper or sit down for a lengthy period of time answering a questionnaire, they might not appropriate responses. So one thing I propose is that we do a kind of a survey card basis, where instead of trying to bombard one person with a lot of questions at any one point in time, just at any point in time we find a sample and give them a card of information on the side. There are specific questions as to a certain part of the questions that we really want answered. And on that day, even though we might return at another point in time with the same card, so we might not necessarily be the same person or both. the real objective is that we're trying to find ways to get people to spend less time filling out surveys, or more attractive ways to make people think that, oh, this is really not my problem. The concern that we have is that because we're not getting one person to answer all the questions that we have at the same time, is that it introduces another aspect of inconsistency in the analysis of the data.
I agree with you. I would be inclined to try and do one instrument. People spend a lot more, are willing to spend a lot more time with you than you think. On the other hand, I agree with you that you want to be sensitive to it and you don't want to abuse their receptivity. You really can find a way to pare down what you're asking, I think, and oftentimes. I don't like theoretically, you say, okay, right, there are match samples and everything is going to be, but I don't. I suspect that you. I think it's valuable that the fact that as people work through a questionnaire, they're learning, and it is feeding into what comes later. So when you get to experiential, take for instance, the survey we buy on media habits. It's outrageously long. It's what they're trying to do is they're trying to get every 15 minutes of your life for the previous day with the media. So they're asking about, did you read the newspaper? Or did you read this section, that section, that section? And if you listen to radio, what time were you listening to what station is what they're running through with you. And then they go to the TV and no one knows what programs you're watching. It's incredibly detailed. And yet they manage to administer it. And they don't break that up into saying, okay, right, I'm going to ask Wayne about this, and I'm going to ask this one about that. People will give you information. Try not to abuse them, but I am nervous about breaking stuff up and hoping that match samples are going to work.
Apart from the income question, what other kind of questions are people sensitive about?
Their bedroom habits is the one that comes most quickly to mind. I can't think you want to know too much about anybody's religion, really. I mean, yeah, maybe you do. You might be in a country where a large percentage of the population is vegetarian for religious reasons. So you might, it's going to, and you're going into the steakhouse business. You might need to know. But usually the things people are going to be uncomfortable talking about are the things you and I are just reflect on what you don't want to talk about, and when I say talk to the general public, because you're responding in a questionnaire to somebody who's just walked up to you in the street, at best, because it might be somebody who's called you on the telephone, and it's funny. I mean, you go through this thing it's an unusual thing to happen to you in Jamaica. Whereas if I'm in the States, it's much more often I pick up the phone and somebody is asking me a question. That has to do whether or not getting good data by call. I think it's sensitive that you are taking advantage of people's generosity when you're doing questionnaires and trying to write them with some sympathy for the person who's on the other side of the thing, with the understanding that you're doing that not only because you're a nice guy, but also you want better research results. Because if you abuse them, they're going to abuse you. It's human nature, I think. would it be to include a reward for participating in Friends or a digital token? Hopefully you give it right at the end and you don't tell them you're going to give it to them at the beginning. Yeah, people love that. And that it's much more common in qualitative work, like where you're doing these focus groups. It was typical that they would get a payment because they're giving you an hour of their time. And it was not unusual that they would get a payment at the end of the session. And very often there would be others of stuff. You have to be careful that you're not corrupting the pool. Because very often the research companies are going back to the same people. You start giving away too much product, then they say, oh yeah, Colgate likes to do research, or Beecham likes to do research. But yeah, I don't have a problem with giving people, but let's say I'm nervous about doing it too much with samples of your own product. We all tend to do, because it doesn't show up on any accounts as an expense for many companies. Everybody else is falling asleep. Okay, yeah. Important that a lot of people look at giveaways as the marginal cost of production. Most of the sophisticated companies look at it as the retail price, not the retail price, the ex-factory price. My own view is that is the correct thing to use, because you're putting it out into the marketplace. To me as a writer, most people are able to convince. Somebody send me aliens exist. No problem. They don't trouble me. Okay, thanks very much. I think, yeah. Thank you all very much. It was my pleasure, and I hope I haven't confused too many people. Thanks. Roughline, anybody have any real questions?
Well, I have a set of questions too. I'm not exactly finished.
Okay.
But I don't know if you want to talk, but there's not really that many questions as I would want to be, especially with the case I'm going to be doing standards. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But typically, if you generate feedback, the format of the questions, or if you have any tips on, I mean, I've been looking up a few tips. If there's any strategic way to format the survey so that
Keep it neutral.
neutral.
Let's make sure it's neutral. You do not want to lead people. And it's very difficult for you not to lead people because you know where you want them to come out. I mean, I'm not suggesting you're a terrible person, but it's just, you know the right design for a plug, and you want them to come out there and tell you that that's what they want. But what you really want from them is that, and so you need to be very careful that you're not leading, that you're asking. And it's more difficult. The more the thing is in the mainstream, the easier it is. I'm asking you about shampooing. Yeah, you shampoo. I'm asking you about underarm deodorants. Yeah, you do that. I'm asking you about toothpaste. Yeah, you do that. You're fine. I come in now and I'm asking you about water usage. it's going to be difficult for you to think about what water usage is, because hey, you might be using more water flushing a tank than drinking it out of the fridge, but you don't think about that. So you have to design a questionnaire that gets people into telling you the things that you know they're using water for.
Right. So, like in our case, what I have done, which I'm reconsidering now, is I asked a few questions pertaining to how much they want to feed of my problem. So it's a case where, for example, how much would you want to get when you leave the home and forget to turn off electrical appliances, which is basic. So like, I want to get their feedback on what they would think about the feature, or if I don't want to let them know that.
And I don't
I want to be neutral.
And I don't claim I'm not a questionnaire writer.